You know that feeling? That tightness in your chest? The way your pulse just seems to speed up for like no obvious reason? Or maybe it's that constant loop of what if thoughts. You know, the kind that just plays over and over.
Yeah, definitely.
It leaves you feeling physically tense, kind of wired, maybe even jumpy.
Yeah,
And it can really feel like you're stuck, can't it?
absolutely. Like you're trapped in this state of constant worry, this anxiety that it just won't quit.
Yeah.
And it's actually an incredibly common experience, that feeling of being perpetually on alert. It's more than just those brief stressful moments we all have.
Right.
It sort of settles in and becomes the baseline for some people, and it really impacts how you move through your day, how you navigate the world.
And that persistent state, that's exactly what we're going to dig into today, this cycle of constant worry. It's a pattern that can feel, well, incredibly hard to break out of. So our mission here is to take all these sources you've gathered, insights from health organizations, psychology guides, even experts on habits, and try to understand not just why worry can feel so constant,
Right. The why is important.
but critically, what these different perspectives are telling us we can actually do, and what are the practical steps to start shifting things to find a bit more calm.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be looking at those really intricate connections between, our minds and our bodies in this whole experience.
Okay.
And then we'll really unpack the practical tools and strategies that these different sources offer up to help disrupt that anxious loop.
Okay, sounds good. So let's start right at the beginning. How do these sources actually define worry or anxiety? Is it just, feeling stressed out, or is there more to it?
Well, they generally describe worry and anxiety as a natural response. It can be uncomfortable, obviously, but it's a response to stress or even just the perception of a threat.
Perception.
Yeah, it's basically your system getting ready for something you anticipate is going to be difficult or negative.
So the body and mind are kind of gearing up for trouble, whether it's actually real trouble or just something you think might be trouble.
Precisely. And the sources, they draw a pretty clear line between what we'd call normal, temporary stress or worry and the more chronic, problematic kinds.
Okay, how do they make that distinction?
Think about normal stress. Maybe you've got a big work deadline or you have to have a tricky conversation. Your body's alarm system, it clicks on.
Right. Heart races, maybe
Yeah.
sweaty palms.
Yeah, exactly. Senses might sharpen. You get that burst of energy. And then, crucially, once the deadline passes or the conversation's over, your system usually comes back down to its baseline, restores itself. Some sources mention typical stressors like health worries, work pressure, money, family stuff. Even bigger societal issues can trigger this.
But with chronic stress or anxiety, the system, it doesn't come back down. It stays switched on.
Exactly right. One source from the Office of Women's Health points out that when the stressors just don't let up, or maybe when the anxiety involves this persistent perception of threat, your body just stays in that high alert state. It can't properly switch off, and that constant activation, that's where things start to become problematic. It leads to this whole cascade of issues down the line.
And the core of anxiety, it seems like one source mentioned, is really about worrying about a future event, something you expect will be negative, and you're trying to cope with that potential future right now in the present.
That forward-looking focus is absolutely key. You're essentially living through this hypothetical negative future as if it's already happening.
Wow.
And this shows up in a whole range of signs, both physical and mental, that lots of the sources detail.
Okay, so what kind of physical signals are we talking about? What's the body actually doing when it's stuck in that state? I saw lists from like the Portland Clinic and others.
Yeah, they list quite a few. Physically, you might notice things like difficulty concentrating, maybe persistent headaches, that classic feeling of cold or clammy hands.
Oh, yeah, I get that.
Right. Or tight muscles, shoulders, neck, jaw, even your stomach. A nervous stomach is very common. Clenching your teeth, feeling physically on edge, fidgety.
Like you can't sit still.
Exactly. Or feeling irritable, maybe even wanting to withdraw physically, pull away from people or situations. These are all ways your body's trying to tell you it's under significant internal pressure.
It's like your system is constantly revved up, ready for action, but there's often nothing concrete to actually act on.
That's a really good way to put it. And then mentally and emotionally, sources like Anxious Minds and the Portland Clinic mention things like excessive worry, but not just about big crises, worrying intensely about everyday issues too.
Right, the small stuff gets blown up.
Yeah. And often there's restlessness, that trouble concentrating we mentioned. Sometimes your mind might just go blank when you try to focus. And sleep disturbances are huge difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up feeling unrested.
So it really is a full system thing. It's not just in your head. It hits everything: sleep, digestion, muscles.
Absolutely. And when it becomes chronic, the impact really deepens. Sources like the ORWH Guide and the Cleveland Clinic actually link chronic stress and anxiety to some serious long-term health consequences.
Really? Like what?
Well, conditions like heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, even mental health conditions like depression and, well, anxiety itself can be either caused by or certainly worsened by chronic stress.
Wow, that's significant.
It is. And the ORWH Guide also talks about the impact on just daily functioning things like poor concentration, persistent bad moods, professional burnout, basically a general decline in both mental and physical health over time.
It sounds like it fundamentally chips away at your ability to just, be okay and function well day to day.
It really does. And, one source makes a really important point about individual differences, too. Stress and related conditions like PTSD, depression, anxiety, they can show up differently and be experienced differently depending on various factors, like gender. For instance, they note these conditions are often more commonly diagnosed in women.
That's a valuable distinction.
Mhm.
And they also talked about resilience, right? How some people seem to bounce back more easily than others.
Yes, resilience definitely varies. Some people might even perform better under a bit of pressure. But the really empowering takeaway here, highlighted in the sources, is that resilience isn't some fixed trait you're just born with or not.
Oh, okay.
It's actually a capacity that can be learned and strengthened over time. There's this great quote they use: "It's not how far you fall, it's how high you bounce."
Okay.
Yeah, the idea is that by learning to navigate stress and anxiety, you can actually build up your capacity to recover more effectively. And sometimes maybe even develop a greater appreciation for life because you've managed to get through those difficult times.
That completely shifts the perspective, doesn't it? From, am I resilient or not, to, okay, how can I build more resilience? That feels much more hopeful.
Definitely.
Okay, so we have a handle on what anxiety is, how it feels, the impact, how do we get trapped? What does this cycle look like that keeps people stuck?
Right, the vicious cycle. Guides like Handspring Health and Healthy WA map this out really clearly. It's basically a loop that feeds itself, reinforces itself, and usually starts with a trigger.
Okay, a trigger, what kind of thing?
It could be something external, like, I don't know, getting an email you're dreading or being in a crowded space. Or it could be internal, just a worrying thought popping into your head, like, oh no, what if I messed up that presentation? Or sometimes it's just noticing a physical sensation, like your heart skipping a beat.
Okay, so something sets off the internal alarm.
Exactly. And that trigger immediately leads to physical sensations and anxious thoughts. Your body reacts, heart pounds, palms get sweaty, chest feels tight, all those things we talked about. And your mind starts spinning with those what-if scenarios.
So the alarm's ringing loud and clear, and your body and mind are reacting like it's a 5-alarm fire.
Pretty much. Now, this next part is really the crucial pivot point in the whole cycle, because those sensations and thoughts feel so uncomfortable, unpleasant.
Yeah, you want them to stop.
Right. So the natural inclination is avoidance. You try to escape the trigger. Maybe you literally avoid making that phone call, or you skip the party, or you constantly seek reassurance from others. Or, and this is really key, you might engage in what the sources call subtle avoidance or safety behaviors.
Subtle avoidance. Like, what does that look like?
Well, Healthy WA gives examples like always needing a friend with you in certain situations, or relying heavily on medication, maybe even when it's not strictly necessary for that specific moment, just as a security blanket. Or always having an exit strategy planned out.
Oh.
Handspring Health also mentions things like needing medication readily available or constantly checking your body for symptoms. These aren't full-blown avoidance, but they're ways of getting through the situation without fully facing the discomfort and learning that you can actually tolerate it on your own. You're basically doing it with a safety net.
Got it. So you managed to get through the situation, but you end up thinking it was only because of the safety net, not because you could handle it.
Precisely. And here's where the cycle really gets its power. That avoidance, whether it's full or subtle, brings short-term relief.
Phew. Dodge that bullet.
Exactly. You didn't have to feel the full intensity of the anxiety, or you felt safer because you had your strategy in place. And that relief, well, it feels good in the moment.
Of course it does.
But, and this is the catch, it's a deceptive relief. Because the avoidance worked in the sense that it reduced the immediate discomfort, your brain takes that as confirmation. Confirmation that the feared situation was genuinely dangerous or overwhelming, and that you couldn't have coped without avoiding or using your safety behavior. It reinforces the fear.
Oh, wow. So the relief you get now actually cost you later by making the fear stronger.
Exactly. That reinforcement means the next time you encounter that trigger or even just think about it, you're likely to experience increased fear. The anxiety is often more intense, which then makes you even more likely to avoid.
And the cycle just gets tighter and tighter.
Yeah, it spirals. Healthy WA mentions this can lead people to avoid more and more situations, sometimes significantly narrowing their life experiences.
It really is a powerful feedback loop, isn't it? As Handspring Health put it, it just keeps the anxiety alive because you never give yourself the chance to learn that you can handle the discomfort, that the feared outcome probably won't happen, or that you could cope, even if it did.
And this whole cycle, it's deeply rooted in our biology, particularly that brain-body connection. Sources like Handspring Health and the Cleveland Clinic explain the famous fight-or-flight response. At the heart of it is your amygdala.
The brain's alarm system.
Kind of, yeah. Think of it as the brain's emergency detection center. When it perceives a threat, real or imagined, it signals your sympathetic nervous system. This floods your body with stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and that causes your heart to race, breathing quickens, muscles tense up, all designed to prepare you to either fight the danger or run away fast.
Like that classic example, the early human seeing a tiger that the Cleveland Clinic source used. The body instantly goes into full emergency survival mode.
Exactly. That's what the system evolved for: immediate, life-threatening danger. But here's the critical problem when it comes to anxiety, which these sources really highlight. The amygdala often misfires.
Misfires.
It struggles to tell the difference between a perceived threat, like just thinking about giving a speech, or being stuck in a crowded elevator or having a difficult conversation, and a real physical threat like that tiger. The full-blown stress response gets triggered anyway.
So your body is reacting as if your life is literally on the line, even when you're actually perfectly safe, just maybe uncomfortable or stressed.
Precisely. And the Cleveland Clinic source makes such a powerful point about modern stressors. They're different from the tiger, right? Things like chronic financial worries, ongoing relationship problems, discrimination, loneliness, not getting enough sleep, past trauma.
Yeah, those aren't things you can just fight or run away from once and be done with.
Exactly. They can be ongoing, pervasive parts of life, and they keep that fight or flight system constantly simmering or even fully activated, leading to that state of chronic anxiety.
That really clarifies why it can feel so relentless sometimes. Your body is stuck in emergency mode because the tiger, the stressor, just isn't leaving.
It does. And Handspring Health brings in another relevant concept here called interoception.
Interoception, what's that?
It's basically your body's ability to sense its own internal state, things like your heart rate, how your stomach feels, your body temperature, muscle tension, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, for people struggling with anxiety, there's often a tendency to misinterpret these internal signals. So maybe a slightly faster heart rate isn't just noticed as a physical sensation. It's immediately interpreted as proof that something is terribly wrong or that you're about to have a panic attack.
So you feel something,
Yeah.
and your anxious brain jumps to the worst conclusion.
Right. Which then, of course, ramps up the anxiety even more. The source notes that a lot of the communication between the body and brain is actually bottom up. The body sends signals and the brain interprets them. So if that interpretation is skewed towards threat,
It creates its own vicious feedback loop, just based on misreading your own body signals.
exactly, it feeds right back into and strengthens that anxiety cycle we talked about. Handspring Health uses that really vivid example of a teenager who's afraid of public speaking.
Okay, how does that play out?
So the thought of the upcoming presentation is the trigger. This immediately triggers physical symptoms, sweaty palms, pounding heart, and anxious thoughts like, oh no, I'm going to freeze up, everyone will laugh. Their response is avoidance. Maybe they decide to skip class that day.
Right.
Skipping brings that short-term relief. Phew, I didn't have to do it. But because they avoided, their brain didn't get the chance to learn that maybe they could have handled the discomfort or that the feared outcome wasn't guaranteed.
Right, they didn't disprove the fear.
Exactly. So the next time they even think about public speaking, the fear is likely even more intense because the avoidance actually reinforced the idea that it is dangerous and that they can't cope.
That example makes the cycle so clear. It's really easy to see how someone could get stuck in that pattern. Okay, so if that's the loop, how do we start to unravel it? Where do we begin? The sources seem to say the very first step is awareness.
Absolutely fundamental. One source really stresses that you can't begin to counter the signs of stress or anxiety if you don't even recognize them when they show up for you.
Right.
It's about tuning into how your specific body and mind communicate stress. It's almost like becoming a detective of your own internal landscape.
And part of that detective work is identifying your personal triggers, right? The things that tend to set off that cycle for you. And like Handspring Health pointed out, triggers aren't always external things like crowds or deadlines.
No, definitely not. They can be purely internal. Maybe it's a negative self-talk thought like, I'm not good enough, or a specific memory could trigger it. Or sometimes it's just noticing a physical sensation, like that knot in your stomach we mentioned.
Handspring Health suggested a pretty simple reflection exercise to help build this awareness. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. It's a really powerful yet simple tool. When you notice yourself starting to feel anxious or stressed, the idea is to just pause for a moment and reflect on 4 key things. First, name the situation. What was happening right before you noticed the feeling? Just describe it factually.
Okay.
Second, notice your thought. What thoughts were going through your mind just then? Try to catch them. Third, identify your feeling. What emotions are you actually experiencing? Anxiety, sure, but maybe also fear, frustration, sadness. Name them. And fourth, tune into your body. What physical sensations are present? Tightness, heat, shakiness, numbness. Where do you feel it?
Okay, situation, thought, feeling, body.
Exactly. And the absolutely crucial part, Handspring emphasizes, is doing this without judgment. You're not trying to fix it right then. You're not criticizing yourself for feeling that way. You're just observing, gathering data about your internal experience. Remember, all emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, carry information.
Just gathering the facts on your own internal weather report, not judging the rain.
That's a great way to put it. And journaling comes up repeatedly across multiple sources. Handspring Health, Verywell Mind, the NHS in the UK, the Portland Clinic, as a really powerful tool for building this awareness and actually going beyond it too.
How does writing it down help specifically?
Well, for one, it helps you see patterns over time that you might completely miss otherwise.
Like noticing, oh, every time I have to talk to my boss, I get that stomach ache beforehand.
Exactly. The NHS guide says it helps get those swirling, often overwhelming thoughts out of your head and onto paper. That alone can make them feel less powerful and easier to examine more objectively.
Yeah, I find that too. It gives them some distance.
Right. And Verywell Mind adds another layer. Unlike just thinking about your worries, which can easily turn into rumination where you just spin your wheel.
Yeah, the endless loop.
Writing actually forces your brain to slow down a bit, to organize the thoughts enough to get them down. This can actually interrupt the anxiety cycle itself and help clarify what's really at the root of it.
And imposes some structure on the chaos.
It really can. And Handspring Health offers another valuable perspective here, too. They acknowledge that anxiety doesn't always have one single clear-cut trigger. Sometimes it's more the result of accumulated stress over time or maybe subconscious associations you're not even aware of. So while identifying specific triggers is definitely helpful when you can, sometimes the most practical approach is to focus less on figuring out the ultimate why behind every single anxious feeling and more on how you respond when the anxiety shows up. How do you meet it?
That's actually a relief to hear. You don't have to become a trauma detective tracing everything back to its origin before you can start making changes.
Exactly. You can start working with the how right now.
Okay, so we understand the cycle. We know how to start identifying our personal entry points into it. Now, for the really empowering part. These sources don't just describe the problem, they give us concrete strategies, things we can actually do.
Yes, absolutely. And the really encouraging thing is the consensus across these different sources. They all emphasize that these patterns, these cycles can be changed. Resilience, as we discussed, can be built. And there are multiple, often overlapping strategies you can start to practice.
Let's dive into those. Where should we start? Maybe with the strategies that focus on our thinking patterns, the cognitive approaches.
Sounds good. Several sources really dig into this. One guide talks about reframing. This is about consciously choosing to change how you think about and respond to situations that normally trigger stress or anxiety.
So actively looking at it differently.
Exactly. It's about finding a different perspective. They give some really relatable examples, like if you're stuck in traffic, instead of getting frustrated and thinking this is ruining my day, you could reframe it as, okay, unexpected extra time to listen to my favorite podcast or some music.
Okay. Turning lemons into podcast time.
Right. Or if someone is rude to you, instead of immediately taking it personally, you could try reframing it by thinking, wow, they must be having a really terrible day, which can shift your internal reaction from anger or hurt to maybe empathy or even just neutrality. It's about deliberately choosing to keep situations in perspective. And they make the point that reframing is like a muscle. The more you practice looking at things differently, the better you get at it, the more automatic it becomes.
So you're consciously rewriting the story you tell yourself about what's happening.
Exactly. And other sources, like the Portland Clinic and the NHS, suggest directly challenging those anxious thoughts themselves. Put your fears on trial, so to speak.
How do you do that?
Ask yourself, is this fear actually true? What's the real evidence for it? What's the evidence against it? Can I rationally talk myself down from this ledge that my anxious mind is trying to push me onto? It's about applying a firm reality check.
Okay. And Very Well Mind offered a more structured way to do this kind of challenging, using journaling, right?
Yes, they have this great technique they detail called journaling to challenge anxious thoughts. It's really practical. You start by setting aside maybe 5 to 15 minutes and you just write your worries down, especially the what ifs. Get them all out of your head onto the page. What are you afraid could happen?
So step one is just the brain dump. Get it out.
Yep, get it out. Then the next step is crucial. Reread and rethink. Go back through what you just wrote. And ask yourself, honestly, how likely is that feared outcome, really? Maybe rate it on a scale of 1 to 100. What's the actual probability? How do you know? Could there be other possible outcomes that are less negative, maybe neutral, or even positive? This forces you to really confront the gap between the fear and the reality.
Putting the fear under a rational microscope.
Right. Next step, think differently. Actively brainstorm alternative explanations for the situation or less catastrophic possibilities. Try to generate new, more balanced stories about what might be happening or what could happen.
Okay.
Then recall your strengths. This is powerful. Think back to challenges you faced in the past, big or small, and successfully overcome. What inner wisdom, what strengths did you tap into then? This reminds you of your own existing capacity for resilience, that you've handled hard things before.
Yeah, drawing on your personal history of bouncing back like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Then comes, consider a plan. Ask yourself, if this feared outcome actually did happen, what would I do? What resources could I use? Friends, family, professional help, specific skills I have. What would be the very first few steps I would take? Very well. Mine points out you don't need a perfect, foolproof plan here. Just outlining some initial resources and action steps can be incredibly grounding and reduce that feeling of helplessness.
Right. It shifts you from just dreading it to thinking about how you'd actually handle it, even hypothetically.
Precisely. And the final step they suggest is decide how to prepare. Identify one concrete, actionable thing you can do now, regardless of whether the fear ever comes true, to build your resources or your resilience. This might be strengthening a key relationship, learning a new skill that could be helpful, or even just committing to a daily stress reduction practice like deep breathing. The point is that putting energy into this kind of proactive preparation moves you out of that passive, anxious state and into a place of empowerment.
Wow, that structured journaling process really takes anxiety from being this thing that just happens to you to something you can actively engage with and work through.
It really does. And Very Well Mind also briefly mentions the thought diary, which is a classic tool from cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
It's another structured way to track things.
Mm-hmm.
The situation, your automatic negative thoughts, the feelings they trigger, then challenging the illogical illusions or distortions in those thoughts with evidence, and finally arriving at a more balanced, realistic reality perspective. It's another great way to systematically notice and change those unhelpful thought patterns that fuel anxiety.
And the NHS, they have those specific techniques, worry time and the worry tree. Those sound really practical for stopping worries from just consuming your whole day.
Yeah, these are fantastic, very concrete tools.
Yeah.
The basic idea behind worry time is pretty simple. Instead of letting worries just pop up and hijack your attention whenever they feel like it, you actually schedule a specific time to deal with them.
Like booking an appointment with your worries.
Kind of. The NHS suggests maybe 10-15 minutes once a day, or maybe a few times a week. When a worry arises outside of that scheduled time, you consciously acknowledge it, tell yourself, okay, I'll think about that during my worry time later, and then actively try to redirect your focus back to whatever you were doing.
So you're essentially putting a boundary around the worrying, containing it to a specific slot.
Exactly. You're managing it rather than letting it manage you. And then during that designated worry time, you can use the worry tree tool. It's basically a decision flow chart for handling each worry you've written down.
Okay, how does the worry tree work?
You look at a specific worry and ask, is this something I can actually do something about right now or in the near future? If the answer is yes, then it's a solvable problem. Your next step is to brainstorm potential solutions and then make a concrete action plan. What exactly will I do? How will I do it? When will I do it?
Okay, turning worry into action.
Right. But if the answer is no, if it's something you have little or no control over, maybe it's a hypothetical what if, far in the future, or worrying about something like the weather, then it falls into the unsolvable category. In that case, you either schedule a time to revisit it if it might become solvable later, or if it's truly uncontrollable, the task is to practice letting it go and deliberately shifting your focus back to the present moment, to something you can influence. The NHS highlights how this whole process helps you feel less burdened and more present during the rest of your day.
These cognitive strategies seem really powerful for tackling the anxious thoughts part of the cycle directly. But anxiety feels so physical, doesn't it? What about calming the body down when it's stuck in that fight or flight gear?
That's absolutely essential. You can't just think your way out of it when your body is screaming, danger! So multiple sources emphasize physiological strategies. Breathing techniques are probably the most fundamental, mentioned by almost everyone. Healthy WA, Handspring Health, Anxious Minds, Portland Clinic, ORWH.
Because anxiety makes your breathing go all fast and shallow.
Exactly. And that fast, shallow breathing can actually worsen the physical symptoms, making you feel dizzy or lightheaded, or making your heart race even faster. So consciously slowing down your breath is a direct countermeasure.
And deep breathing actually slows your heart rate down too, right?
Yes, the Portland Clinic and ORWH specifically mentioned that. Handspring Health suggests really focusing on slow, deliberate exhales, which seems to be particularly effective for triggering the body's relaxation response. And mindful breathing, which the NHS and Anxious Minds talk about, is using the physical sensation of your breath as an anchor to pull your attention back to the present moment, away from those future-focused worries.
Okay. And the Cleveland Clinic source brought up the vagus nerve. That sounded really interesting in terms of calming the system.
Yeah, this is where the science gets super fascinating. The vagus nerve is basically the main highway of your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the rest and digest system, the counterbalance to the sympathetic fight or flight system.
So it's the body's brakes.
That's a great analogy, yeah. Its main job is to help calm the body down, slow the heart rate, promote digestion, and basically restore everything to a state of balance once a perceived threat has passed.
So if the amygdala is like the fire alarm, the vagus nerve is kind of like the signal saying, okay, false alarm, stand down.
In a way, yes. Activating the vagus nerve sends signals up to your brain basically saying, hey, we're not actually in mortal danger right now, which helps to disengage that fight or flight response. And the Cleveland Clinic explains that you can actually strengthen something called your vagal tone.
Vagal tone.
Yeah, it's essentially a measure of how efficiently your vagus nerve is working. A stronger vagal tone is associated with higher heart rate variability, or HRV.
HRV, I've heard of that. It's the variation in time between heartbeats.
Exactly. And higher HRV, which indicates a healthier, more adaptable nervous system, is linked to all sorts of positive outcomes. Things like reduced risk of heart disease, improved brain function, more stable mood. Basically, it makes you more physiologically resilient to stress.
Wow. So you can actually train your nervous system to be calmer and more resilient just by strengthening this vagal tone. That's incredible. How do you do that? What activities stimulate the vagus nerve?
Well, the sources list a bunch of things that tap into this. Breathing exercises, especially those slow exhales we mentioned, are key. Mindfulness and meditation practices definitely help. Yoga and Tai Chi are great too. Biofeedback can train it directly. Even just spending time in nature, sometimes called forest therapy, has been shown to help.
Nature, really?
Yeah, and other simple things too, like humming, singing, or even gargling can stimulate the vagus nerve because it passes through your throat and diaphragm. The good news, as the Cleveland Clinic notes, is that most people can practice these kinds of calming activities safely.
It sounds like a lot of things people intuitively do to relax or de-stress actually have this specific physiological benefit through the vagus nerve.
Exactly. And other relaxation techniques get mentioned too. Progressive muscle relaxation is a common one, consciously tensing and then releasing different muscle groups, which helps you become aware of where you're holding tension and actively let it go.
I've tried that. It really works.
Yeah. And visualization is another, using calming mental imagery, like picturing yourself in a peaceful place, to mentally transport yourself away from the stress.
And what about movement? Exercise always comes up as a stress buster.
Absolutely essential. According to pretty much all the sources we looked at, Portland Clinic, Anxious Minds, ORWH, Handspring Health, exercise is a major way to discharge that pent-up physical tension and stress energy.
Right, it burns it off.
Yeah, and it releases endorphins, those natural mood boosters. Regular exercise can significantly lower anxiety levels, not just in the moment, but over time, too. It can even help prevent future anxiety episodes. ORWH really highlights making it a vital part of your daily routine.
Does the type of exercise matter much? Does it have to be super intense?
Not necessarily. The sources mention a whole range. Simple walking, stretching, yoga, but also more intense workouts if that's your thing. The key seems to be finding movement that helps you release that physical energy and tension that anxiety often stores in the body. And Handspring Health adds something simple but important. Just getting sunshine and fresh air also supports your body's internal chemistry in ways that are beneficial for managing anxiety.
Makes sense.
And related to that, the Portland Clinic advises being mindful of things that can worsen anxiety, like too much caffeine, refined sugar, or alcohol.
Okay, so calming the body involves specific techniques like breathing and working with the vagus nerve, but also these broader lifestyle things that support your physical well-being overall.
Exactly. Which leads us perfectly into the third major area of strategies: building resilience through habits and lifestyle choices. This brings in that perspective from habit experts like James Clear. He makes the point that our lives are, to a really large extent, just the sum of our habits. Something like 40% of what we do every single day is driven by habit.
Wow, 40%. That much of our life is basically on autopilot.
It's a huge chunk, and the really powerful implication of that is if you can consciously transform your habits, you can fundamentally transform your life, including how you experience and manage anxiety. Many of the most effective strategies really boil down to consciously building new, healthier habits to replace old, unhelpful ones, like the habit of avoidance.
Like making a habit of taking time for yourself, which ORWH recommended.
Yes, exactly. Making self-care a non-negotiable part of your regular routine. ORWH really emphasizes this isn't selfish, it's absolutely essential for building resilience. This might mean learning to say no sometimes to things that drain you, or deliberately prioritizing activities that actually nourish you and fill your cup. Even small, consistent changes in this direction build resilience over time. And this ties right back into Handspring Health's point about focusing on those foundational needs. Consistently making sure you're getting quality sleep, regular movement, fresh air, sunshine, and eating nutrient-dense foods. These aren't just optional extras when you're dealing with anxiety. They're essential because they directly influence your body's biochemistry, which in turn affects how well your brain and nervous system can handle stress and regulate anxiety.
So managing anxiety isn't just about what you do when you feel anxious. It's also about building this strong foundation of overall physical and mental health through your everyday choices.
Precisely. And mindfulness fits perfectly here as a habit to cultivate. Anxious Minds defines mindfulness really simply as intentionally bringing your full attention to the present moment, whatever's happening, without judging it.
Right, being here now without commentary.
Yeah. It has ancient roots, of course, but it's now a widely used secular tool, and the benefits for anxiety and stress are pretty well documented.
What are some of those benefits?
Well, Anxious Minds highlights that consistently practicing mindfulness improves your ability to regulate your emotions, builds resilience to stress, and can significantly reduce symptoms of both anxiety and depression. And the techniques can be really simple, just focusing on your breath for a few minutes each day, doing a body scan meditation where you gently bring awareness to different parts of your body, or even mindful walking, just paying attention to the sensation of your feet hitting the ground. Even mindful eating counts, really engaging all your senses as you eat.
Okay, but how do you actually turn something like mindfulness from a nice idea into a regular daily habit? That seems like the hard part.
It can be. Anxious Minds offers some practical tips. Try to create a specific time and place for your practice, make it part of your routine. Set reminders, maybe use a mindfulness app on your phone. Start small, even just 5 minutes a day is way better than nothing. Choose techniques you find accessible or even enjoyable. And the absolute key, which both Handspring Health and James Clear would emphasize, is consistency.
Right, showing up regularly, even for short periods.
Yes, because consistency is what builds the habit. And building these new habits literally helps to rewire those anxious patterns in your brain. That's neuroplasticity in action. The brain's amazing ability to change and adapt based on repeated experience.
Ah, so the habit science connects right back to the brain science we were talking about earlier. Small, consistent actions, physically changing your brain over time.
Exactly. It's incredibly empowering when you think about it. Other valuable habits the sources mention include things like gratitude journaling.
Focusing on the positive?
Yeah, consciously shifting your focus away from worries and towards things you appreciate in your life. Building new routines and adding structure to your day can also help create a sense of control and predictability, which can be calming. Making a habit of noticing good minutes each day, deliberately pausing to find or do something enjoyable, however small, to break that cycle of negative focus. And of course, maintaining a regular sleep schedule is fundamental because anxiety and poor sleep are so often locked in that vicious negative feedback loop.
That's a really comprehensive toolkit, just based on daily habits and lifestyle choices. What about the role of other people in all this? Anxiety often makes you want to pull away, isolate yourself.
Right, it does. But that isolation is often the exact opposite of what's needed. Multiple sources really underscore the vital importance of connection and support. ORWH advises actively making an effort to stay in touch with family, friends, community groups. Just talking things through with someone you trust can be incredibly reassuring and calming in itself. They even mention using video calls to help enhance that feeling of real connection if you can't be together in person.
And the Portland Clinic specifically mentioned spending time with loved ones as a direct way to counteract the isolation that anxiety often creates.
Yes, they did. They emphasize seeking out support from people who make you feel lighter, who make you feel loved and truly supported, not judged. And Handspring Health takes this a step further, suggesting that feeling emotionally safe in your connections with others is a really significant foundational factor for reducing anxiety.
Emotionally safe.
Right.
What does that mean exactly?
It means knowing you have people in your life you can be truly vulnerable with, people you can share your struggles with without fear of judgment or criticism. Having that kind of secure base provides a profound sense of psychological safety, which is a powerful buffer against anxiety.
That concept of emotional safety within relationships feels incredibly important, maybe even overlooked sometimes, in managing anxiety.
It really is fundamental. And ORWH also adds the practical point of seeking help with specific problems or life challenges from trusted friends, family, or other resources. Sometimes just getting practical advice or support on navigating difficult life strains can significantly reduce the anxiety those strains are causing.
We've covered so many different strategies now, ways to address thoughts, calm the body, build healthier habits, strengthen connections. It's a lot to take in. But what if someone is trying these things maybe consistently and they still find their anxiety is just overwhelming or it's just not getting better?
That's a critical point, and the sources are very clear on this. While all these self-help strategies are incredibly powerful and can make a massive difference for many people, sometimes anxiety is just too severe or too persistent, or maybe it's linked to other complex issues like trauma or depression. In those cases, professional support isn't just helpful, it's absolutely necessary. Both the Portland Clinic and Very Well Mind strongly emphasize this.
Okay. So what are the signs? How does someone know when it's time to move beyond self-help and seek professional help?
The sources provide some pretty clear indicators. Basically, if your anxiety feels unmanageable most of the time, or if it's significantly impacting your overall well-being and quality of life, if you find yourself turning to substances like alcohol or drugs to cope, if it's seriously harming your relationships or your ability to function at work or school, if it's interfering significantly with just your basic daily activities, or it feels incredibly difficult to control no matter what you try, if it seems linked to physical health problems, if it's occurring alongside other mental health concerns like depression, or, and this is critical, if you are experiencing thoughts of harming yourself or thoughts of suicide. In that case, seeking immediate help is essential. One source mentions resources like the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline for urgent support.
Those are really important red flags to pay attention to. And it helps remove any stigma around seeking help when you see it laid out like that. What kind of professional help is typically recommended?
The sources mention a few main avenues. Therapy is often key. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, comes up a lot. Handspring Health calls it a gold standard for anxiety because it directly targets those unhelpful thought and behavior patterns we've been talking about.
Right.
But other therapeutic approaches might be beneficial too, depending on the person and the underlying issues. Things like relational therapy or specific trauma-informed care if past trauma is a factor. Medication can also be a very helpful tool for some people, particularly to manage severe symptoms and create enough breathing room to effectively engage in therapy and practice other coping strategies. Resources exist, like Sam Acho's provider locator mentioned in one source, to help you find qualified mental health professionals in your area.
And the Portland Clinic had that great perspective shift, again reminding us that admitting you're struggling and reaching out for help isn't a sign of weakness at all. It's actually an act of strength and self-empowerment.
It really, really is. Sharing that burden and collaborating with a professional who can offer tailored strategies and support can be incredibly liberating and make a huge difference.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a huge amount of ground in this deep dive.
Mm.
We've really looked closely at what constant worry and anxiety actually are, how that self-feeding cycle can trap us, how we can start to identify our own personal patterns and triggers.
Mm.
And we've armed ourselves with this incredible wealth of strategies drawn from all these different sources, techniques for working with our thoughts, ways to calm our bodies, ideas for building supportive habits and routines, and the importance of strengthening our connections.
And I think the overarching message that comes through from all these perspectives is really one of hope. It's that breaking the cycle is possible. It's fundamentally about consciously disrupting that pattern, especially challenging that powerful urge towards avoidance or relying too heavily on those subtle safety behaviors, as Handspring Health explained.
Yeah, and consistency really seems like the quiet superpower here, doesn't it? Consistently practicing these new habits, whether it's just a few minutes of mindful breathing each day or journaling or making time for movement, that's what helps to literally rewire those anxious pathways in the brain thanks to neuroplasticity.
Absolutely. And it's not about aiming for overnight perfection, which is impossible anyway. As sources like Handspring Health and James Clear gently remind us, progress with anxiety often isn't a smooth, straight line. There will likely be bumps, moments, or days when it feels harder again. The key is to just keep practicing the strategies as best you can, and crucially, to be kind and compassionate toward yourself throughout the process. Even small, conscious shifts away from the automatic, anxious reaction repeated over time can build real momentum.
And remembering those foundational needs we talked about, getting enough sleep, eating nourishing food, moving your body regularly, nurturing genuine connection, they aren't just nice-to-haves. They're the essential building blocks for a nervous system that's better equipped to handle stress and regulate itself effectively.
Exactly. Learning resilience, building that capacity to bounce back, maybe even bounce back higher after facing challenges, as that ORWH guide put it, that's arguably one of the most valuable life skills we can cultivate.
So all this knowledge, all these strategies we've pulled from these sources, they're really tools. Tools for you, the listener, to start experimenting with, to start reclaiming your own calm center, and to begin influencing that anxious pattern that might have felt so automatic and unchangeable before.
It's really about taking back some agency, some sense of control in your own well-being.
You know, if anxiety is so often characterized by worrying intensely about a future that hasn't actually happened yet, what possibilities might open up if you could learn to channel even just a fraction of that same energy into building trust in your own ability to handle whatever does come your way?
That's a powerful question to sit with. Definitely something to consider as you move forward from here.